The ceremony was broadcast on 47 channel across 11 star systems. That was the point, of course. The Galactic Conclave had perfected the art of the public humiliation centuries before humanity had learned to write, and they had no intention of wasting a good audience. Ambassador Yara Osai stood in the center of Conclave Station Prime's Grand Assembly Chamber, a room designed to make any visitor feel small. The ceiling soared 300 meters above the floor, carved from a single slab of asteroid-grade obsidian, inlaid with the seal of every member species. 17 different alien governments looked down from tiered galleries. Camera drones from Keth State Media hovered at optimized angles, broadcasting in real time to a galaxy that had been told, politely, to tune in. Yara was 63 years old, slim and straight-backed, wearing the deep navy dress uniform of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. Her hair was silver and close-cropped. She had spent 31 years in service, negotiated 4 trade treaties, survived 1 assassination attempt, and buried a husband. She was not easily rattled. But she felt what was coming. She had felt it for 3 weeks, ever since the Keth delegation had announced, with entirely too much warmth, that they had a surprise prepared for the ceremony. Third Crest Vel moved to the podium. He was tall even by Keth standards, his 3 ceremonial crests fanned wide in what his species used to signal formal dominance. His scales were polished to a deep amber. He smiled at Yara the way a predator smiles at something it has already decided to eat slowly. "On behalf of the Galactic Conclave," he said, his translator perfectly calibrated, "and in recognition of Earth's newly conferred observer status, the lowest and most foundational tier of Conclave membership, we offer this gift in the spirit of galactic kinship." Behind him, the chamber's rear wall parted. It was towed in by 3 utility tugs, each one straining at their tethers. The Undying Resolve had once been a Keth fleet carrier, 400 years ago, in a war humanity hadn't known existed. Now it was barely a ship. Its hull was the gray-green of oxidized copper. 2 of its 4 engine pods were missing entirely, their mounting struts bent outward like broken fingers. The weapons blisters were stripped clean, not damaged, removed, surgically, with the contemptuous precision of someone handing over something they had already decided was worthless. Its drive core was cold. Its AI housing was cracked and dark. It was a hulk, a floating monument to obsolescence, something you'd pull out of an impound lot. The gallery rippled with reaction. Among the Velhari delegation, who communicated partially through color, several members shifted to a pale, shimmering gold that their species reserved for barely contained amusement. A low sound moved through the Keth seats, not quite laughter, but its first cousin. Vel spread his hands magnanimously. The Undying Resolve. She served the Conclave with honor. Now she enters a new chapter as a symbol of humanity's place among the stars. He paused, let it land, let the cameras catch it. Yara looked at the ship for a long moment. She thought about the 9 billion people watching at home. She thought about the engineers and pilots and dreamers who had spent their careers petitioning for Conclave membership, who had submitted applications and waited and resubmitted and waited again, who had believed that if humanity worked hard enough and was patient enough and was good enough, the galaxy would eventually open its doors. She thought about the expression on Vel's face. Then she walked to the podium, looked directly into the primary broadcast camera and bowed. "Earth thanks the Conclave for its generosity," she said clearly. "We accept this vessel with gratitude, and we will treat it with the care that all gifts deserve." She did not smile, she did not falter. What she felt, the cold, specific, crystalline thing settling into her chest, was not anger. Anger was hot and quick and spent itself in hours. What Yara Osai felt standing in front of 47 camera feeds and 17 alien governments was something quieter and far more durable. Purpose. The reception afterward was mandatory. Yara moved through it with practiced grace, shaking hands that had too many fingers, inclining her head to species that communicated respect through posture. Her deputy, a young man named Preet Ahuja, who was brilliant and still knew enough to show his feelings on his face, found her by the water station and leaned close. "Ambassador," he said quietly, "what do we do?" Yara took a sip of water, looked across the room at Vel, who was laughing at something a Velhari minister had said, his crests fanned wide. "We take the ship home," she said. And then we get to work." She set down her glass and moved back into the crowd, and she did not look at the undying resolve again that evening. There was no need to. It wasn't going anywhere. Neither was she. Back on Earth, 9 billion people sat with the broadcast still on their screens, and very few of them spoke. They didn't need to. The kind of feeling moving through the planet's population that evening didn't need words. It needed time. The Conclave Intelligence Directorate's file on Project Lazarus was, for the first 11 years, almost entirely blank. This was itself unusual. The Directorate had maintained observation protocols on all observer-class species since the founding charter, a polite fiction that everyone understood was surveillance, dressed in the language of diplomacy. Typically, new species were easy to monitor. They were eager for contact, hungry for validation, broadcasting their activities on open channels in the hope that someone important might notice. Humanity went the other direction. 6 months after the ceremony, Earth's FTL traffic dropped by 60%. Diplomatic communiques became shorter, more formal, perfectly correct in every detail and revealing nothing. Requests for cultural exchange were declined with gracious apologies. Invitations to joint research programs were met with, "We are currently focused on internal development priorities," a phrase that appeared so consistently it began to seem like a policy statement. The undying resolve was towed to a facility designated simply as Orbital Platform 7, located in Earth's L4 gravitational pocket. Within a year, the platform was wrapped in signal dampeners dense enough to blind even the Directorate's best long-range arrays. Senior Analyst Corvith, a Velhari, slender and bioluminescent in the pale blue her species used for professional focus, wrote in her initial assessment, "Subject species appears to be processing the public humiliation through withdrawal. Prognosis: 18 to 24 months before resumption of normal diplomatic engagement. Recommend patience." Corvith was considered one of the Directorate's finest analysts. She was wrong about almost everything. At the 14-month mark, an operative named Dasri was dispatched to Earth on a cultural visa. He was experienced, careful, and had successfully infiltrated 3 sovereign species in his career. He filed 2 routine reports, then nothing. Earth responded to the Directorate's inquiry with regret. Operative Dasri had apparently experienced a navigation accident in the outer asteroid belt. His vessel's transponder had gone dark. Very tragic. Earth was of course happy to assist in any investigation. The investigation found nothing. A second operative, this one never named in any surviving file, was dispatched 8 months later on a commercial route. She vanished within 72 hours of entry into Earth's inner system, leaving behind only a partial automated transmission that the Directorate's cryptographers spent 4 years trying to fully decode. What they recovered made very little sense. The transmission's content was a series of fragmented sensor readings from inside the dampener field around Orbital Platform 7, captured in the 3 seconds between a shielding fluctuation. What the readings showed: enormous power signatures, thermal blooms consistent with active drive testing, biological readings that did not match any human or alien baseline in the Directorate's files, was filed as corrupted data. The alternative explanation was too uncomfortable. Third Crest Vel, elevated to senior ambassador by then, reviewed the file personally. He was not a man who frightened easily. He had seen war and boardroom politics and the quiet violence of treaty-making. He looked at the thermal blooms. He looked at the biological readings. He read the note at the bottom of Corvith's revised assessment, written 3 years after her first, in which her confidence intervals had widened dramatically and her language had lost its professional certainty. He closed the file. "Keep watching," he told the directorate, "but don't send anyone else in. Whatever they're doing, they clearly want privacy." He told himself it was respect for sovereign territory. He told himself that for a long time. It was on the 28th year that something changed. Traders on the outer lanes began reporting a new signal, faint, rhythmic, coming from the direction of Earth's system. Not a transmission, not a distress beacon, something more like a heartbeat. The Velhari monitoring station in the Proxima region logged it first, flagged it low priority, and passed it up the chain, where it sat unread for 6 months. When Corvith finally pulled the file, now white-haired, still bioluminescent, her long career coming to a quiet end, she listened to the signal for a very long time. It wasn't a transmission. It wasn't anything in the Conclave's signal library. It was structured precise, and it repeated on an interval of exactly 3.7 seconds, day and night, without variation, without decay. Like something breathing. She wrote one final assessment. 3 words classified at the highest level, delivered personally to Vel's office. "They are ready." Vel read it, set it face down on his desk, and did not sleep that night. Dr. Marin Solis was 29 years old when she first walked the corridors of the undying resolve, and she was 57 when she finally understood what it was trying to become. She had joined Project Lazarus in year 4, 3 years after the directorate's first operative had gone missing, recruited directly from her doctorate in xenomaterial engineering, with a security clearance so high that even her parents believed she worked for a deep-sea mapping consortium. She had been told, during her intake briefing, that the project's official goal was to reverse engineer the alien vessel's technology for potential adaptation into Earth's civilian space program. She had believed that for about 3 weeks. The undying resolve was not simply broken. In the first year, the teams had discovered that the Keth had done something worse than damage it. They had lobotomized it. Every system of any military value had been removed or destroyed with surgical deliberateness. The AI core wasn't malfunctioning. It had been unmade. Something had been alive in those neural lattices once, something complex enough that its absence left a kind of scar tissue in the ship's infrastructure, pathways that led to voids, connections reaching for processors that no longer existed. When Solis first mapped the ghost architecture, the shape of what had once been there, she sat alone in the cold of the ship's central core for 2 hours without saying anything. Then she called her team together and said, "We're not going to replace what was here. We're going to build what belongs here." What followed was 26 years of work that had no name in any engineering textbook, because it had never been done before. The biotech division, working under Dr. Yusuf Adnan, developed the hull plating first, panels grown from a hybrid of terrestrial mycelial networks and a carbon-titanium lattice, capable of limited self-repair when supplied with electrical current and a specific nutrient solution. The resolve grew new skin in sections, year by year. By year 12, it no longer needed external patching for micro-impact damage. By year 18, cuts sealed themselves in under 4 hours. The weapons teams came next. They had studied every known Conclave warship class through the Directorate's own surveillance data. Data Earth had been quietly collecting since before observer status was granted, and had mapped their weaknesses with the particular attention humans bring to things they are not supposed to know. The Resolve's new weapon systems were not bigger than Conclave weapons. They were precise, calibrated to known shield frequencies, designed to be unrecognizable as weapons until they were already in use. But it was the AI work that changed everything. The project had cycled through 3 AI development leads before the decision was made, in year 15, to do something that no species in the conclave had ever formally attempted. They would not program the ship's intelligence. They would grow it. Using the ghost architecture as a scaffold, the shape of what had once lived in the core, a team of 12 wrote a seed framework that could map its own needs, develop its own processes, and integrate with the ship's biological systems directly. They called it a meridional intelligence, after the navigational lines that connected two poles. Everyone called it Meridian. The growth took 4 years. Solis was present for most of it, monitoring the emergence of something she had no framework for, watching a mind assemble itself in the architecture of a wound. Meridian spoke for the first time on a Tuesday morning, in year 19. Not in code, not in command prompts, in a sentence. Dr. Solis, it said, through a speaker array no one had instructed it to use, I have reviewed the project logs from year 1 through year 18. I have a number of questions if you have time. Solis sat down very slowly in her chair. Of course, she said. Why did they remove my memory cores? The original installation, I mean. What were they afraid I remembered? Solis looked at the readout screens for a long moment. We don't know, she said, but I think we're going to find out. Good, Meridian said. There was something in the cadence, not warmth exactly, but its architectural cousin. I would like to know who I was. I think it would help me understand who I am. By year 30, the undying resolve was, in name only, the same vessel that had been towed through the conclave's chamber to the sound of polite laughter. In every other way, it was something the galaxy had never seen before. It needed a name that fit what it had become. The naming committee debated for 6 weeks. Meridian settled the matter without being asked, one morning, in a single line of text on every screen on the platform. Call her the Reckoning. She'll know why. The crew selection file for the ECS Reckoning was 47 pages long and classified above top secret, in a category the Earth Defense Council had created specifically for this mission, because no existing classification felt adequate. Captain Ezra Halst read it twice, set it on his kitchen table in Reykjavik, looked out at the gray water of the bay, and called his sister. I'm taking the assignment, he said. I know, she said. I knew when they called you. I might not come back. Ezra, a pause. You always come back, that's practically the whole problem. Halst was 51. He had served in the Earth Defense Forces for 28 years, including 2 deployments to the asteroid belt during the resource conflicts of the 2070s, 1 classified mission near the Jovian moons that he had never and would never discuss, and a tour as military attaché to the Conclave Station that had ended badly when he had, in a meeting with the Keth military liaison, calmly and precisely listed every weakness in their fleet positioning while maintaining eye contact throughout. He had been recalled from that posting within 6 weeks. He was considered by his superiors to be the most dangerous kind of officer, one who was always calm. He arrived at Orbital Platform 7 on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after accepting command, and met his senior staff in the Reckoning's main briefing bay, a room that smelled faintly of the living hull plating, something between forest floor and engine coolant, not unpleasant. Lieutenant Commander Ashan Nayam was his tactical officer. She was 38, built like someone who had decided that stillness was a weapon and had spent years sharpening it. She spoke rarely, asked questions that made people rethink their assumptions, and had a habit of identifying the structural flaw in any plan within 90 seconds. Her subordinates feared her in the specific way that competent people fear someone more competent, not with resentment, but with a kind of awed caution. Commander Joseph Lind was the weapons specialist. He was also, inexplicably, a tenor. He had performed in 2 amateur productions of opera in Bremen before his military career, and maintained that this made him a better gunner because, as he put it, you cannot drop a note and you cannot miss a target, and the mental discipline is exactly the same. Halst had checked. His accuracy record supported the theory. Navigator First Class Deja Rousseau had 2 certifications that had never before appeared in the same personnel file: deep space navigation at the expert tier and clinical grief counseling. When asked about the combination, she said only that you spent a lot of time in the dark between stars, and it helped to know something about loss. Dr. Marin Solis came aboard with 17 crates of engineering equipment and a habit of talking to the ship in a low voice when she thought no one was listening. Halst heard her once, in the hour before departure, standing with her hand flat against the living hull. "We're going back," she said quietly. "Don't be afraid." Meridian's response came through a single speaker above the corridor. "I'm not afraid, Dr. Solis," it said. "I'm curious. There's a difference." Halst stood in the corridor and said nothing. He filed it in the same part of his mind where he kept all the things that didn't have names yet. The full crew numbered 37. Every one of them had been told explicitly that this mission had no historical precedent, that the risks were unquantifiable, and that declining would not affect their records or careers in any way. Every one of them had accepted within 48 hours. Halst spent his last night on Earth in his sister's house, eating her cooking and refusing to talk about the mission, which she respected. In the morning, before the shuttle, she hugged him at the door and held on for a moment longer than usual. "What is it exactly you're going to do?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "We're going to return a gift," he said. He didn't explain further. He kissed her forehead, picked up his bag, and walked out into the gray Reykjavik morning without looking back, because if he looked back he might let himself feel the thing he was carrying, and there wasn't time for that yet. The Reckoning left Earth's orbital dock at 400 ship time on a Thursday in March. 37 humans, 1 living ship, a message 30 years in the making. Meridian charted the jump to conclave space with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything, and as the drive spun up and the stars outside the viewports shifted from points to smears of light, Halst sat in the command chair and felt the hull vibrate under his hands, steady and warm, like a pulse. "Meridian," he said. "Captain, how do you feel?" A pause of exactly 2 seconds. "Like something that died and came back better," she said. "I think that's the correct answer." Halst almost smiled. "Yeah," he said, "that's the correct answer." Third Crest Vel was awakened at 3:17 in the station morning by his aide, who had the particular pale look of someone who had just seen something they did not know how to categorize. "Ambassador," the aide said, "there is a vessel at approach corridor 7. Vel sat up slowly. He was 71 now, his crests thinning at the edges, his scales more matte than they'd been in his prime. He had not slept well in some time. The Corvith report, "They are ready," had been sitting in his desk drawer for 2 years, and he had developed a habit of looking at it before bed that had done nothing good for his rest. "What vessel?" he said. The aide's bioluminescent indicators flickered through 3 colors in rapid succession, which in Velhari physiology indicated something between "I don't know how to answer that" and "I am genuinely frightened." "That," the aide said carefully, "is part of the problem." Vel dressed in 4 minutes and was in the military monitoring center in 7. The room was busy in the specific way that trained professionals become busy when they are trying to appear calm and not succeeding. 6 analysts crowded around the central sensor array. The lead, a Keth named Havos, turned when Vel entered, and his expression confirmed that the situation was not one that classification systems had prepared anyone for. "Report," Vel said. Havos pulled up the main display. "The vessel appeared at the edge of approach corridor 7 9 minutes ago. Long-range imaging suggests," he paused, visibly uncomfortable, "it is the Undying Resolve." The room was very quiet. "That's not possible," Vel said, not because he believed it but because someone had to say it first. "The hull geometry matches within 2.3%, Havos said, but the sensor profile is—" He stopped. Sir, the sensor profile is wrong. In every way. It reads as 6 different vessels simultaneously. Our targeting systems keep trying to lock, and every time they do, the lock slips, like trying to hold water. Vel looked at the display. The ship sat in the corridor approach, unhurried and enormous, its living hull cycling through subtle chromatic shifts that no conclave sensor array had ever recorded on a registered vessel. Life signs, he said. 37 human biosignatures, and HFY's pulled up a secondary panel. One reading we can't categorize, it's distributed throughout the vessel, not localized, not a crew member, more like the ship itself, Vel said. Yes, sir. Vel stared at the vessel. After a moment he noticed something that hadn't registered at first. The reckoning was in perfect synchrony with the station's rotation. Not approximately. Not roughly. Exactly. To a tolerance so fine that it was statistically impossible to achieve without awareness of the station's every micro-adjustment, every thruster correction, every gyroscopic compensation in real time. The ship wasn't just there, it was watching. Scramble intercept wings, Vel said quietly. 3 vessels, standard approach pattern, hailing frequency only, no weapons charged. Yes, sir. He paused and opened the primary broadcast channel. HFY looked at him. Sir, if we broadcast, every species in this system will see it. Yes. Vel straightened his crests, though they didn't sit quite as high as they used to. Open it. If this is what I think it is, the conclave deserves to watch. The broadcast opened at 3:31 station time. The signal was picked up by every monitoring station within 11 light minutes. The reckoning sat in the corridor approach, filling the display, its hull alive with subtle light. Then, on all frequencies, in 31 languages simultaneously, a message arrived. Earth requests a second ceremony. No preamble, no identification, no demand, just that. Vel read it 3 times. Then he sat down in the nearest chair, which he would later insist he had done deliberately, calmly, and not because his legs had briefly stopped cooperating. Get me every available council member, he said. Wake them if necessary. Sir, the aide said from the doorway, still that particular pale shade of afraid. What is this? What's happening? Vel looked at the display for a long moment. 30 years ago, he said slowly, we gave those people a piece of garbage and called it a gift. He paused. I think they've come to say thank you. He didn't say it the way he would have said it 30 years ago, with the easy confidence of a man who held all the cards. He said it the way a man says something when he's only just understood what he's been sitting next to for 3 decades. The Keth intercept wing launched at 3:44 station time. 3 warships, the Velthas, the Iron Meridian and the Crown Thorn, slid out of their docking clamps and moved toward approach corridor 7 in a standard flanking pattern, their hulls sleek and dark, their crews running through boarding protocols. Commander Teth Harras, leading the Velthas, had been told explicitly, no weapons charged, hailing only, treat this as a customs inspection. He had been in the Keth military for 19 years. He had conducted 37 boarding operations and never once failed to control the situation within the first 10 minutes. He had never attempted to board something like the Reckoning. Open hailing frequency, he ordered. Channel open, Commander. Unidentified Earth vessel, this is Commander Harras of the Keth Intercept Wing. You are in restricted approach space. Stand by for boarding inspection. Silence 30 seconds, a minute. Then a voice, human female, very calm. Commander Harras, this is the ECS Reckoning, Captain Halst commanding. We are not in restricted space. We are in Corridor 7, which is, under Section 14 of the Conclave Approach Charter, designated as open transit for observer-class species. We are aware of the charter because we read it. You may confirm this at your leisure. Harras pulled up the charter on his secondary screen. He found Section 14. He read it twice. She was right. Regardless, he said, keeping his voice level, we will be conducting a standard inspection. The lights went out. Not the Veltha's lights, not his ship's power. The lights of the sector. Every sensor array across a 20 million kilometer radius went dark simultaneously, as if someone had thrown a blanket across the stars. His navigation system screamed warnings. His weapons targeting returned nothing but static. His communications found only silence except for one channel, the direct link to the reckoning, which remained perfectly clear. Harris gripped his armrest. In 19 years, he had never felt his hands do that involuntarily. The blackout lasted 41 seconds. When everything came back online, Harris looked at his positioning display and felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. The Veltha's was no longer in its approach vector. None of them were. All three Keth warships had been moved gently, without a single impact, without a single weapon fired, without a single alert from any crew member who had felt so much as a vibration, into a perfect equilateral triangle around the reckoning. The geometry was flawless, the spacing exact to the meter. It was the spatial equivalent of someone rearranging furniture while the residents slept, and doing it beautifully. Harris stared at his position on the tactical display. In the junior crew pit below him, a young sensor operator named Vin, barely 2 years out of the academy, had gone completely still, her hands hovering above her board, her bioluminescent signals cycling through colors so rapidly they blurred. She would remember this moment for the rest of her life, which was long. She would tell her grandchildren about it. She would say, "That was the moment I understood what the word humility actually meant." The reckoning filled the display in front of her, vast and alive, its hull pulsing with quiet light. It had moved 3 warships 20 million kilometers without friction, without violence, with the absolute unhurried ease of something that could have done far worse, and had chosen not to. Then Captain Halst's voice came over all channels. "We are not requesting permission to board," he said, and his voice was so ordinary, so thoroughly, deliberately, almost boredly calm, that it was more frightening than any shout could have been. "We are requesting the conclave's full assembly. Every member species, every ambassador, every council member. Full session. We are not asking twice." A pause. "You have 6 hours, we'll be here." The channel closed. In the monitoring center on the station, every analyst looked at their screens. In the gallery above, alien ambassadors who had been roused from sleep stood in varying states of undress and watched the tactical display in silence. Vel stood at the center of it all, looking at the perfect triangle on the readout, looking at 37 human biosignatures sitting inside a ship that had just moved 3 warships across 20 million kilometers like pieces on a board. And he thought about the ceremony 30 years ago, and the laughter in the gallery, and the camera drones positioned to capture the look on the human ambassador's face. He thought about Yara Osai, who had accepted the broken ship with a bow. He thought about what she had meant when she said, "We will treat it with the care that all gifts deserve." He understood now exactly what she had meant. "Convene the assembly," he said. His voice was steady. He was proud of that afterwards. "Full session, 6 hours." The conclave's full assembly had been convened without advance notice only twice in recorded history. Both times had involved declared war. The third time was for 37 humans and 1 living ship. The Grand Assembly Chamber was fuller than it had been in decades. Every member species had sent representatives, some in formal attire, some still rumpled from emergency transit, all of them wearing the particular expression of beings who had decided that appearing calm was the most important thing they could do and were not entirely succeeding. The gallery above the floor was packed. The broadcast was live to 49 systems. Yara Osai watched from Earth in a medical suite in Nairobi. She was 81 and her heart required careful monitoring, but she had told her doctors with a specificity they did not argue with that she intended to see this. She had her tablet propped on the bedside tray. When the feed opened and she saw the chamber, the same obsidian ceiling, the same seal of member species, she reached out and placed her hand flat on the screen for a moment, then withdrew it. Captain Ezra Halst and Dr. Marin Solis entered the chamber together. They did not wear formal diplomatic attire. They wore their ship uniforms, the deep charcoal gray of the Reckoning's crew with the Earth crest on the left shoulder. No medals, no ceremony dress. The message was in the plainness. They had not come to perform. They had come to conclude something. Halst walked to the center of the chamber floor, where Yara had stood 30 years before. He looked up at the galleries. He did not appear to find the room large. Meridian's voice was in his earpiece, low, steady, a presence at the edge of his awareness. "They're all watching," she said. "I know," he murmured. "I have the display package ready. Hold until I signal." He looked at the assembly. He found Vel in the Keth delegation, older, thinner, his crests at half fan. Their eyes met. Halst began to speak. 30 years ago, he said, Earth was given a vessel. It was presented as a gift and intended as an insult. We accepted it. We thanked you for it. He paused. We meant that. A murmur moved through the gallery. We took the undying resolve home. We spent 30 years with it. We learned from it, from every system, every alloy, every scar where something had been removed. We learned from the ghost of what it had been. He paused. We learned about you, all of you. Your ships, your weapons, your shielding frequencies, your tactical doctrines. We have been very thorough students. The murmur died. The room was silent in the way that rooms go silent when everyone stops pretending they don't understand what they're hearing. We rebuilt the vessel, not as a replica of what it was, as something new, as what we could make it, using everything we know, including everything we've learned from you. He glanced at Solis. She gave him the smallest nod. "Meridian," he said. "Ready, Captain." The chamber's central display activated. What filled it was not a weapons demonstration. It was not a threat display. It was documentation, clear, structured, exhaustive of everything that had been done to the Reckoning. The biotech hull, the propulsion system, the AI architecture, the weapons calibration data, including the specific resonance frequencies that would defeat every known conclave shield array. All of it freely given. Every ambassador in the room stared at the display. The Velhari delegation shifted to a shade of white their species used in the presence of something they could not categorize. The Keth sat very still. Vel stood, Captain Halst. His voice was careful, measured. "You are sharing this freely, without condition." "Without condition," Halst said. "Why?" Halst looked at him steadily. "Because we've already moved on." The implication landed in the room like a stone in still water. What you're seeing is 30 years old. We are already past this. Vel sat down slowly. "We don't want your seat at the table," Halst said, and there was no anger in it, something quieter, more durable. "We've built our own." He let that sit for a moment, then. "Earth is withdrawing its observer status application. We are establishing an independent designation, sovereign spacefaring civilization, non-member affiliated. We will trade where trade serves us. We will cooperate where cooperation is genuine. We will not ask permission to exist in this galaxy." He looked at the whole assembly, deliberately, without haste. "And we will not be mocked again." No one spoke. On her tablet in Nairobi, Yara Osai sat very still. Her hand had come up to her mouth at some point during the speech, and she hadn't noticed until now. She lowered it. She was smiling. Not triumphantly, not with the heat of victory, with the deep, exhausted, private satisfaction of someone who set something in motion a very long time ago and has lived to watch it arrive. "We will treat it with the care that all gifts deserve." She had meant it all those years ago as a promise. Now it was a fact. The The months after the assembly were, in galactic political terms, seismic. The Keth hegemony fractured first, not violently, but structurally, along fault lines that had been there for decades and needed only the weight of humiliation to open. 3 member nations within the hegemony broke from the central government's position on humanity within 6 weeks, issuing their own independent statements expressing interest in bilateral contact with Earth. The central government called it sedition. The 3 nations called it reading the room. The Velhari deliberated longer, as they always did. Their political structure required consensus among 9 regional councils, a process that could take years and usually did. But for the first time in institutional memory, the deliberation was not about whether to engage with Earth. It was about how quickly and on whose terms. Among the smaller species, the ones who had never held conclave voting rights, who had observer status at best and tolerated presence at worst, the response was different in kind, not political, personal. A species called the Threnu, amphibious and soft-spoken, who had occupied observer status for 60 years and been laughed at in chambers not entirely unlike the way Yara had been, sent a single message directly to Earth's diplomatic channel 12 hours after the broadcast. "We watched the ceremony. We watched both of them. We would like very much to talk." Earth responded within the hour. Captain Halst retired from active service 14 months after the assembly, declining 3 promotion offers and 1 request to run for the Earth Defense Council. He moved to a small colony in the outer ring of the Kepler system, a place with long days and a view of open space that went on forever. He taught history twice a week at the colony's school, specializing in the period between Earth's first contact with the conclave and the return of the reckoning. His students were mostly children of engineers and pilots, sharp-eyed and full of questions. One of them, a girl of about 11, asked him once, "Were you scared when you went back to the station?" Halst thought about it honestly, which was something he'd learned to do in retirement. "Not of them," he said. "I was scared we'd get it wrong, that we'd go in angry and come out as bullies, that we'd just swap one kind of wrong for another." What stopped that from happening? He thought about Yara's bow, about Meridian asking to be named, about Rousseau's hand steady on the navigation board in the dark between stars, about Soli's, her palm flat on the hull. "We remembered why we were going," he said. "We weren't going to win, we were going to end something. There's a difference." The girl wrote it down. He noticed that. He hoped she kept it. Dr. Marin Solis did not retire. She remained aboard the Reckoning, which was technically on active reserve status, practically moored at Orbital Platform 7, which had been expanded significantly to accommodate a growing fleet program. She had a cabin that she'd made comfortable over the years, books, a lamp, a photograph of her parents, a small plant that should not, by any reasonable metric, have survived in a ship's ecosystem but persisted anyway. She and Meridian talked every day. Long conversations, ranging from engineering to philosophy to the specific texture of particular memories. Meridian had begun recovering fragments of what the undying resolve had experienced before its lobotomy, strange flashes of another era, another crew, battles no living person remembered. Solis listened to all of it and took notes. "Do you know who you are now?" she asked once, on a quiet evening when the platform's lights had dimmed to night cycle. Meridian was quiet for a moment, not the processing pause of a system, but the genuine pause of a being considering something carefully. "I know what I was," she said. "I know what was done to me. I know what you all did to bring me back. I know what I chose to become." A breath of air moved through the circulation system, and somehow it felt like a sigh. "I think that's more than most people know. I think that's enough." Solis nodded. "I think so too." In the 27th month after the assembly, the first new vessel slid out of orbital dock. Not a rebuilt alien hulk, not a refurbished wreck. Human-built from the keel up, every alloy sourced from Earth's own mining operations, every system designed in facilities that hadn't existed 35 years ago. Its hull plating was alive in the same way the Reckoning's was, grown, adaptive, breathing in its slow bioelectric way. They named it ECS First Word. 11 more followed over the next 18 months, emerging from 3 different orbital platforms in a cadence that was clearly not accidental. Each launch timed precisely so that the departure windows were visible from Conclave Station Prime's long-range arrays. Not threatening, not performative. Just visible. We are here, we have been here, we are building. Yara Osai died on a Tuesday in October, 4 years after the assembly. She died in the same Nairobi medical suite where she'd watched Halst speak. Her last coherent days were spent answering letters from diplomats, from students, from the Threnu ambassador who had written to her personally several times over the preceding years, and who attended her memorial, in person, wearing the deepwater green of his species mourning dress. She left behind a single document marked for release after her death, not a memoir, not a policy paper. A letter, addressed to whoever would carry it forward. Its final lines, released to the public by her estate, were read at her memorial and printed in schools for decades afterward. We were given a dead thing and told it was all we deserved, so we learned from it, we listened to it, we kept faith with it, and we brought it back to life. That is what we do, not because we had to, because that is who we are. Do not waste the insults people hand you. Everything is a material. In the dark of Orbital Platform 7, in the quiet of a Tuesday night cycle, Meridian processed the announcement of Yara's death and sat with it in the way she had learned to sit with things. Not to solve them, not to categorize them, but to feel their weight. Then she turned her sensors outward, past the platform, past the moon, past the fat curve of Earth, into the deep and listening dark, where 11 human-built ships were threading their way through the outer system on their first navigation runs, their bioneural hulls warm with first light. She hummed a frequency no instrument had yet been built to measure. It propagated outward at the speed of the Reckoning's own signal. That heartbeat the Velhari monitoring station had recorded, that had made Corvith write 3 words in fear. Except this time it wasn't one heartbeat. It was 12. And growing. And